Morning, guys. Can everybody hear me? Morning, Carl. How are you? Can everybody see my screen, my presentation? Awesome. We'll just wait one more minute and then we shall start our training for today. Perfect. Let's get started. Good morning, guys, and welcome to our second training session. I thank you so much for taking the time out today to join our training. We'll be covering our second section of HIK Pro Connect today. So please feel free to stop me at any time to ask me any questions, or you can just drop the questions into the chat box and I'll gladly respond to it as we go along. Right. So as mentioned, today we're going to go through our second session of HIK Pro Connect. So for the guys that joined us the first session, we went through the basic introduction of what HIK Pro Connect does, what it cannot do, the integration between HIK Connect and HIK Pro Connect, the advantages of it as a physical technician, and how it can impact and affect your business if you don't have this. So mentioning that means you have to physically go on site to do certain configurations, to do certain restarts, etc. So today we'll do the updates on the benefits of HIK Pro Connect and how this will assist you in your business. Let's move to this. So this is a training tool, like I mentioned. So today we'll be covering our device management sector. Right, so this is just our overview of what we'll be covering today. We'll be covering our device remote configuration. So as we know, obviously, normal configuration, we go into our physical devices itself, we go into the remote configuration, and there we can do physical changes on our physical system. We're also going to go through our IP remote configuration. This has got to do with our IP cameras. The configuration we can do from HIK Pro Connect, from our mobile, as well as on our physical PCs. Right, excuse me. We also look at our physical live view. We can look at our playbacks. We look at our reply release permissions. This is permissions from our end user or our clients that we physically going to site. Okay. The new functions that we've added onto HIK Pro Connect is the password reset option. We also look at our proxy host function. Okay, this is for devices that is not supported by HIK Pro Connect. For example, the older devices like a K2604 controller, it's not supported on HIK Pro Connect as a standalone. But if we add it via the proxy function, we are able then to do certain configurations on that device. Okay, we're also going to look at our device cross-linkage method. We're looking at our more detailed application for our cloud storage, which I just touched on last week, as well as our cloud network management. This has got to do with our switches. Okay, so moving along, this is our basic device management, right? So if you guys are aware, on your basic device remote configuration, right? This is the remote configuration that you can use to access your NVR or your DVR. This is, for example, your VCA rules, your recordings, your physical settings, right? So in normal circumstances, if a client would call you and say, Robin, I'm having a problem with false alarms, okay? Or there's a problem with the brightness on my physical camera, or I'm having a problem with intrusion detection or a line crossing is triggering too often. That means you have to physically get into our vehicle, go to site, and then obviously go do these configurations for the client. Having the device management device remote configuration, we are then able to log in via either our cell phone or our physical PC. We are then able to go into our physical remote configuration. We are then able to change, for example, our scheduling. We're able then to change our linkage methods. We're also able to change a nice function that they've included here is on our images. We're able then to change the brightness of our physical settings. We're able then to set our events. We're also able to look at our storage. So like I mentioned, this is to save time also. We don't have to physically go to site to do 1 or 2 configurations for the client. The other option that we've integrated right now, this is for IP camera remote configuration. So as you guys are aware, normally what would happen is when you're trying to do configuration on an IP camera, right? That means you need to log into the physical IP camera itself. For example, to do your day-night settings on your physical camera or physically reboot that particular camera itself. You need to physically log into that particular camera. So not only can we do this for our NVRs, we have now incorporated and included this into our remote configuration for our IP cameras. So if you look on your right-hand side, we're able then to physically reboot the physical camera. In the event there's a problem with the camera, we can do a quick reboot. We're also then able to do our adjustment on our images, for example, our day-night settings, which before we weren't physically able to do from a physical platform unless we physically logged into the camera itself. Okay, so that's our added feature that we've added for IP cameras. So moving on, we're going through our device management batch configuration. Okay, this is for AX Pro. So let me give you a bit of an example on this. You'll have multiple AX Pros, for example, on a university site. Okay, so now you come as a physical installer. You now physically go and install one of those AX Pros. And all the configurations are basically the same. So the topology for the whole site is basically the same. So in normal circumstances, you would have to go to each physical device and go and do remote configurations for them. For example, your arming schedules or do your configurations for those physical devices, or you would like to arm or disarm those physical devices. From your HIK Pro Connect app itself or the platform itself, you are then able to arm all your physical devices from one physical platform. You are then also able to do your cross linkages from one particular platform. So even if you save the physical configuration onto a USB or onto your PC itself, you are then able to copy all their configurations over multiple devices over all your site or your one site, for example. Or if you have multiple sites, for example, I have a client that has a steers, he has multiple steers, it is an installer for steers. He then takes the same configuration, he puts it onto his laptop, he is then able then to configure all his steers stores remotely, like it's able also then to physically arm all his devices at the same time or disarm it. And like I said, again, don't have to physically go onto site to physically do this, but if you are on site, you can do your configuration for all your devices from one particular central point instead of moving from one location to another location. Okay, so that is the improvement that we've done on the device configuration, right? Then we also have, like I just mentioned before, we're also able then to remove the, this is the remote batch configuration for AX Pro again. Okay, so in the event we have, like I said, on a platform where there is multiple physical devices, we are then able to set physical rules. So we can physically set our arming schedule. We are then able to set our alarm receiving center. We're then able to set our events. We can set up our notifications via email, or we can set up our FTP. We can then have one configuration that we can select multiple devices, and then we can select the parameters and we can click save. What does that mean? That if we set up one physical device, we save the configuration, we copy it over to multiple devices, excuse me, instead of physically going and walking to each physical device. So we're also then able then to set this through to our alarm receiving center, for example, our ADTs companies. We're also able to do this physically and remotely. All right. We move on to our next one. Then we also have our device management batch configuration for CCTV. So the same topology that we use for the AX Pro, we are then able to do for our CCTV products. All right. From our CCTV product linkages, we can have our physical cameras, for example, on our physical sites. And now we have a new installation. We have now added our NVR. We are then able to add all our physical cameras to our physical NVR itself. We're then able to set our physical linkages to it. We can then activate our physical devices, because most of the time, if it's a new site, all our devices will be inactive. We're then able to activate our physical devices. We're then able to add our linkage methods. We're able then to link it to our physical NVRs. And a lot of times we don't have a physical monitor on site. Hence, we've incorporated this onto a platform itself for a technician. So like I said, you can do this from your mobile application, or you can do it from the physical portal. So this is just our LAN batch configurations for CCTV. Okay, if you're looking at this particular CCTV topology, we're looking at our recording schedule, right? So if we have multiple NVRs on site or multiple cameras that's added to an NVR, we are then able then to set up a recording schedule. Okay, we are then able to save that particular template, and we then be able to copy it to our physical cameras, right? So again, moving back to the steers one, the client also has multiple steers. They use the same topology. The recording needs to start at a certain time. It needs to end at a certain time. So he doesn't physically have to go to each steers and reconfigure everything. If the device has been added to his HIK, the Pro Connect itself, he's then able to copy that physical schedule and add it over to multiple sites. Okay. Also, what we also have on our device management live view, okay, like I mentioned before, we have the remote configuration into our physical cameras itself right now. Okay, so here we can see our name of our physical device or our serial number. Right, we're able then to do our remote configuration. We're able then to do our add linkage rules. We're able to do our live view as well as our playback. Okay, we're also then able to do our physical snapshots of a particular screen at a particular time. So an event that's physically happening, we're able then to take a snapshot of that. We're able then to do the record function. Okay, so we record a certain clip if on our live view status. We're also then able to do our digital zoom from this screen. Okay, in the event the client has a physical PTZ, we are then able to log into the PTZ from our screen. We're then able to remove the PTZ to a function or a preset that the client wants. So instead of going to site again, the client says, Robin, the PTZ is facing the wrong direction. Please, can you sort this out? We can log in remotely, move the PTZ to the current location that the client would like. Okay, we're then also able to change our stream from our high definition to our substream or substream to high definition, depending on the client's needs. Also, the other function that we use a lot is a client that has audio cameras. Okay, the client will call and say, Robin, there's a problem with my audio. I can then physically log into that particular camera. I can then listen to the audio. Is there a problem with the mic? Is there a problem with the speaker? Can I hear the person on the other end? And so forth. Okay, then just again, it's just showing us on our physical playback. What are we able to do on our playback? We obviously do our remote playback for our troubleshooting. So in the event there was an event that the client would like, or to test if the actual recording is physically happening, we can do our troubleshooting from our playback screen. Okay, we are then also able then to do a 2-minute video download playback from this. It only allows us 2 minutes from this on any storage onto our physical PC. And then, like I mentioned before, we can do our capture and our record functionality. So this is available also on the physical portal. Right. So the next one we're going to move on to is our apply and release device permissions. Okay, so what is this? This installer can apply for permission from the end user. So remember, the end user would be the client that we're going to do the installation for, right? You will then have his HIK Connect application. Okay, we will then request for certain permissions from that particular client. So if you have a client that you do physical monitoring for, you will then request for live view permissions. If you are an installer and the client is giving you full authorization onto his site, you can apply for permissions for configuration, for physical live view. You can do playback. You can do all of those things. So all those permissions has to be granted by the end user. So even in the event that you don't have physical permissions or the client hasn't granted you permissions, you will send a request to the client that, hey, it's Robin, I'm at your site right now. I need permissions for live view or I need permissions for playback. You then send a request through to the physical client or the end user. You will then grant you physical permissions, and then you can physically work on his site. Okay. So the next one we currently have is our password reset offsite. Okay, so if you are aware, we have multiple ways of doing password resets. So back in the day, you would either have your forgot password option on your physical machine itself. In the event you don't have that, you can go through the process of put in an email address. Maybe you got the GUID downloaded onto the physical memory stick. It will then send an email to the user who has registered that particular device. It will then ask you some security questions, mom or dad's name, last school, etc. It would then allow you to reset the password. Okay. In the event you didn't have that, you would then have to have your SADP tool as an example. You have to download the XML file. Once you have the XML file, you would then have to send it through to our Hikvision call center team. You have to wait for a physical response from them in order to do a password reset. Okay. The challenges that we picked up for certain technicians is what happens on a weekend. The call center is closed on a weekend. That means they cannot work on a particular site. That means they have to wait for Monday to physically do a password reset. Okay. Excuse me. So what we have done right now is if a client is physically on site, okay, so the client is then connected to that local LAN network. Okay. We as an installer can then from our physical office log onto their physical site. Remember, the site needs to be added onto your HIK Pro Connect. So in the event now you have permission from your client, you are then able to do remote configuration or password reset from your side. You are sitting anywhere in the country, it doesn't really matter, provided the client itself is on site on that local LAN network. We can then log into the physical portal. We can go onto our HIK Connect or on our HIK Pro Connect, or on the client side, the client can go and request for a password reset. The notification from our side will get sent to the client. The client then will accept that, yes, I want my password reset. And then the client himself will be able to reset his password from his site himself. Okay. But remember, this has to work hand in hand with the technician itself. So the client himself cannot do this using the HIK Pro Connect. Okay. Then if we're looking at on-site, okay, this requires an installer who has already been authorized device remote configuration. Okay, so this means that the installer himself, so in the event now, my client is now sitting in Cape Town, he's now gone on holiday. I now need to go to his physical premises because one of his staff has told me, hey, you can't log into our system. I then get on site. Okay, I'm on the same LAN network. His devices has been added to my account. I will then go onto his physical device itself, for example, his camera or his NVR or DVR. I will then click on the password reset option. It will then send a notification to the client. The client on his HIK Connect app will open up the physical app. It will then say, a request from Robin for password reset. Do you accept? You'll say yes. Once he's clicking yes on the physical app itself, the end user then will change the password to the required password that he needs, and then he can send that either to his physical administrator or he can send it back to the installer, and then the password reset can be done for the client. So no need to send the XML file, no need to wait for this to happen. Like I said, it can happen two ways. Either installer can be on site or the installer can be off site, provided somebody that has the HIK Connect app is on the same LAN network at the physical devices. You are then able to do a password reset. Okay, I'm not going to go through too much on the password reset operation videos. I've explained how to do this, but I will send it to you guys for your own usage, right? Then what I mentioned before, I'll proxy through HIK Pro Connect. So because HIK Pro Connect works on a higher software version, right? Certain devices is not physically compatible to these devices. For example, your K2604. The K2604 is the controller, right? That you use for it's a door controller. So these devices is not physically able to be added directly under your device management, right? But due to the fact that we have now the HIK Pro Connect box, we are then able to use that HIK Pro Connect box. We are then able to add that K2604 onto that physical box, and that will allow us remote configuration onto those physical devices. Or if we have devices like an NVR or DVR that is a version 3.4, for example, that is an older version than version 4, we are then able to add up to 16 channels for those particular unsupported devices. We are then able to do our remote configuration, our live view, our playback. But remember, that particular devices needs to be on the same LAN network. Okay, so it cannot be offsite. Okay, so remember, the NVRs has to be the K or the Q series, and the version needs to be higher than 4.31, and then you can add it via P2P. Okay, so also we have a compatibility list. All right, so if you have a device, you can go onto a physical compatibility list and you can see my DVR is a 71 series model, version 3.4. Is it compatible? Is it not compatible? What does my NVR say? Compatible, not compatible, or now access control. So if you see these physical devices, the versions are quite low. So some of the devices are not compatible. But like I mentioned, there is a compatibility list on the HIK Pro Connect itself, where you're able to see, is my device compatible or not? Certain devices you also need to check, guys, is some NVRs and DVRs right now can be upgraded to the latest firmware version. Just depends on the year it was manufactured. Right, so we're going to move on to our device management. Sorry, guys, before I move along, is there any questions from you guys? Okay, cool. So we're going to move on to our device management or our device linkage method. Okay, what is this device linkage method, right? These are flexible linkages. This is our flexible linkages, all right, that we can add certain rules. So if I give you a bit of a scenario, like I think I did in the first video, if we have a access control device or a access control device at our physical door, right? So if somebody comes to that physical door and tries to damage that particular device, right, we can then set a physical rule that if the device is damaged or somebody tampers with it, we would like the camera at the door to start recording, as well as send a notification through to our AX Pro, which is our alarm devices, and we want an alarm to trigger. The alarm will then trigger and will then send a notification through to our alarm receiving center, which is like our ADTs, and then we would like them to physically respond to us because we have physical break-in. Or in the event that a physical door is opened, okay, we can then set a linkage rule for the physical alarm to go off, or you would like a recording to happen, or you would like all the other doors in your offices to lock. We are then able then to physically do that. Okay, so we can physically do this from our device management also. Like I mentioned, we don't have to physically be on site to physically do that. All right. We also have our intrusion. So like I mentioned, you can have an intrusion. If there's an intruder in there, our camera can link that, hey, there's somebody in the particular area, we can link it to our physical alarm or our forced alarm entry. Like I mentioned, if somebody forces the door open or physically damage our physical device, what linkages do you want? You can set up multiple linkages for your physical devices. So remember, we can set up 10 devices can be triggered by one linkage rule. Okay, we also have the back to home or back to office function. So what this physically does is we have the back to home function. So if you have an AX Pro as an example, and you deactivate your physical your alarm system itself, we can then have a privacy mask to say, hey, don't record on my particular camera in the kitchen because I'm back at home right now, or deactivate my physical alarm, or the linkages can then be deactivated. Okay, if you move on to our next one. Okay, like I just mentioned in the previous slide, we have our linkage rules. So we have a physical intruder at our physical door. What do we want to happen? We can take our PAR will pick up that there's a physical intruder. What do we want to happen? We want our camera to pick it up. We want our physical door to lock, and we want recordings to happen on our NVR. Or if we have a physical door broken, we can have our NVR record, or we would like a siren to happen, or we hand the owner's back. Remember I said we can disarm the AX Pro, and then we can deactivate our physical camera for our privacy mask, because now we don't need to see recording happening because we are back at home. Okay, so I touched slightly on the device management. This is our cloud device management previously. So I just want to go through the topology again for you guys so you can basically understand what is happening. So remember our HIK Pro Connect, right? This function is only available for installers who has the HIK Pro Connect, right? So the HIK Pro Connect and the installer would then have this functionality on his device. He then basically can sell this to his client or to render a service to his client for storage. Okay, so the HIK Pro Connect for installer either on his phone or on his PC, you will then have the option to add this to his client's site using his HIK Connect. Okay, what can he do on this particular site, on this particular cloud storage? He has to have that HIK Pro Connect box. Remember, the HIK Pro Connect box is only for installers. A physical client cannot purchase it because he doesn't have HIK Pro Connect. So you can basically sell the client storage for his particular site. Like I mentioned before in the previous slide, it's just little clips that happens. So in the event there's a motion detection, it will record for that few seconds that the event is physically happening. The cloud storage is not there for physical storage like on a hard drive where it will store for 24 hours or 3 days or whatever it is on that. That is not what it is. It's just basically clips for events. Okay, so like I mentioned before, you can have individual cameras that you can physically add. You don't have to have an NVR. So if you have a physical standalone camera with a memory card inside that's connected maybe to a router, you can then link that cameras to your physical HIK Pro Connect and it can do recordings for you, like I mentioned, your clips. Or you can have cameras that is added to an NVR or DVR, and that will also record for you. Remember, you can only add up to 8 cameras onto this physical devices. Then we have our cloud store and activation services. Okay, this is the HIK Pro Connect box that you can add cameras under the DVR or NVR, like I mentioned before. Okay, for cloud storage. Okay, so one HIK Pro Connect box, you can link up to 8 channels. So that would give you like 8 cameras that's added. You can add up to that. Okay, these videos are stored onto the cloud and not in the box itself. So the box itself acts as a link to a cloud server. So that is stored on the cloud server. You can only access the cloud server if you have the HIK Pro Connect box itself. Okay. The cloud storage stores events and related videos. Like I mentioned before, it's like motion detection, intrusion, line crossing. Okay. Also, the HIK Pro Connect box, it acts as the gateway to devices with old firmware on HIK Pro Connect. So remember I said under the proxy function, we are then able to add devices that is not supported by HIK Pro Connect onto those physical devices. And then we can obviously use our storage for those particular devices. Excuse me. Okay, so if you're looking at our physical events, what we can do on our events. So if you see there's a particular event that physically happened, if you look on the right-hand side, we are then able then to search that particular event that happened, a smart event. If you look on the right-hand side, there's a video of it. So this will be exactly the same on your HIK Connect app itself. So if you go to physical playback and you have motion detection enabled only, you'll be able to see that the recording is there just for the events that physically happened. Okay. So once you physically playing that events, you can obviously take a screenshot or you can do a physical recording on your physical app itself and send it to the physical client if he requests it. Or you can go to certain days, or you can go to have your physical live view. Also, if you look at your check your events list, you can have 4 cameras displayed events at the same time. Okay, just checking for any questions. No questions as yet. So now we have what is called the cloud network management. Okay, what is our cloud network management? So in the event that we have switches on site, okay, so Hikvision has what is called a smart switch. Okay, so the smart switch allows us to know which camera is plugged into a certain port, which IP address is allocated to that particular camera. We are then able to see if there is a physical block port. So if our Hikvision smart switch is added to our HIK Pro Connect, Okay, in the event a port is blocked or there's an IP conflict, right? We are then able then to see this from our physical HIK Pro Connect application itself. Okay, we are then able to quickly locate our abnormal device. So in the event that one camera has gone off, we are then able to know exactly where that camera is allocated. So in the event we have to go onto a physical site, we don't have to keep plugging out all the switches to say, hey, from where's the camera plugged in, from port 1 to 32, we don't know. Now we can physically locate that port number 2 has a problem, go to number 2 itself, remove the physical port, maybe it's the connector itself, maybe it's the camera itself, we know exactly where to go to. Okay, in the event that there's an issue with the physical switch itself, we are then able to remotely restart that particular device itself or physically restart that particular camera. Like I mentioned, it has to be a smart switch in order for this to happen. Okay, we also have the online upgrade. Okay, so your device will physically upgrade in the event that the device is connected to the internet. Okay, and there's an update for your physical device itself, for your smart switch. It automatically will update the physical device as and when the update is available. Also, this is what our topology would look like on our physical portal as well as on our application. Okay, here it just shows us all our related devices, right? So as you can see there on the blue, that will show us our particular device. You can show us your physical name of the device. You can label it. It will then also show you the IP address of that device. It will then also show us if the device is physically offline or there's a physical problem. It will show you in red, Robin, there's a problem on this particular camera and this particular IP address, or there's a conflict. It will show you that 2 devices is now on the same IP address. You need to go and change one IP address, or one particular camera has gone down. It will give you the name. It will give you the port where that particular camera is plugged in. So that will save us time physically going on site and doing troubleshooting. Okay. So again, like I mentioned, okay, this is our real-time data, right? So we can physically see our physical switches, all right? So physical statuses will be shown in different colors. So example, if it's green, that means all our devices are online. Our switches, our port on a particular switch is performing 100%. In the event there's a different light, for example, the red light, it will show you maybe there's a busy light. Maybe there's a problem on that particular switch itself. Maybe there's a problem on the particular port. We're able then to see that. We're also then able to see our physical CPU usage on our physical device itself, or maybe it's connected to a PC. We're able then to see the RAM. We're able to see our power. We're able then to see our power, our peak power. Okay, we're then able to see our data traffic on our physical devices itself. Okay, like I mentioned before, we can also restart a particular port itself. So before, if you had a normal switch and there's a problem on the switch, we now then go and restart the physical switch itself. That means all those cameras are down for 2 or 3 minutes. That means no recordings on all our cameras on our particular site. In the event it's just one particular camera that has an issue, we are then able then to restart just that particular port or that particular camera from our physical switch itself, which it assists us with physical downtimes. Okay, so that would help us as physical technicians itself, and make sure that our client side doesn't go down while we're physically doing troubleshooting. Okay, in the event there's a particular alarm on that particular switch itself, we're then also able to clear those alarms remotely. Okay, then it just shows us our physical compatibility list. These are our Hikvision smart switches. So those are the model numbers that is smart switches. And these are our compatibility switches for our HIK Pro Connect. Okay, so also remember on our HIK Pro Connect, we need to be above version 1.5 in order to use these physical switches. All right, and the client himself needs to be on version 4.7 and above in order for our compatibility to work. So like I mentioned before, we have a compatibility list on our HIK Pro Connect application as well as on the portal itself, and just to make sure that all our devices is compatible before we actually distribute to our client. So we'll touch again on our health monitoring. Okay, so previously I mentioned on our health monitoring, what is our key features of our health monitoring? We are then able to, on our health monitoring, we have our health monitoring with our dashboard. These to show us our physical devices on site, can show us, for example, how many devices we have on a particular site, what is the statuses of our physical devices, right? We are then able then to receive real-time notifications of device exceptions. So in the event a device physically goes offline, we will then receive a notification even before the client knows his device is offline. We would know that there's a problem on that device. We can then log into our remote configuration from our end. If we can fix the site remotely, we can then do so, right? We can then, like I mentioned before, we can configure our linkage rules in configuration, like I mentioned, the tamper. We can do this from our health monitoring side, right? We're able then to manage employees' roles and permissions. So like I mentioned before, if you have physical staff members that's physically working for you, you can then give them permissions to go onto site. So you only want them to go and do live view, or you want them to do remote configuration, you are then able to do so. We can also have the employee permissions. This is permissions from the end user side, okay, what permissions they want us to have. Okay, we are then also able to do our log management, like I mentioned before. On our log management, if we give permission to a particular person, so Robin will give permission to Eben to go to site. Once Eben goes on to site and he goes and does some remote configuration, I'm then able to see that Eben now restarted the physical device, Eben then changed the IP address of this physical device. So I can then physically send this to the client that, hey, ma'am, sir, this was the particular problem. I then restarted your device, I changed your IP address, and these are the logs done for your site. Okay. Also, I mentioned the co-branding option. Okay. So the co-branding we'll touch on again. The co-branding is then you are then able to add your physical logo of your physical company onto your HIK Pro Connect. So in any time that the client opens up his HIK Connect app, your logo will be there. Okay, if you physically clicks on the logo, you'll have all your company profile details on there. For example, your cell phone number, your email address, if you have a Facebook page, Instagram, or your physical website itself. Okay, this would also increase brand awareness because all of that details the end user can screenshot and then send it as a referral to somebody else. Okay. So like again, I just mentioned under the health monitoring. So in the event we open up our physical portal itself, this is what we were able to see. We were able to see our physical devices. Okay, what is the statuses of our physical devices? In the event we have a AX Pro, okay, we can then obviously see the battery life of that physical AX Pro as an example. We will then be able to receive proactive and quick inspection of our devices. So in the event a device goes offline, we will then receive a notification within 4 minutes of that device physically going offline, and then we can attend to it. All right. All other status, for example, if there's a hard drive failure or any errors of it, we will receive that notification within 30 minutes. Okay. We are then also able to do our real-time device exception notification. Okay. We can then set up a physical email that can get sent to our physical installer, or we can send this to our physical client itself. Okay, we can also do our report. So like I mentioned, our report is there for 7 days. It will store up to 7 days on our physical device. So we can get this report sent to our physical clients or to what our technicians have done on site. We are then able to export this. The formats we're able to do this in is Excel, CSV, as well as PDF. I think we have a question. Yeah, your co-branding is grayed out. Yes, this is something you need to purchase on the physical app. So have you purchased the health monitoring? If not, Sabukile, you can just email me. Let me just put my email address over here. I'll put my email address over there. You can drop me an email with your query, and I will gladly attend to it for you. Also, guys, that in my email address. If you guys have any queries or issues with HIK Pro Connect or any questions that you currently have, please feel free to send me a mail and I will gladly assist you. Right? So moving on to the next one. On our next one, this is just how to get the physical app itself, right? So our HIK Pro Connect, this is available on our Play Store or physical Play Store itself, all right? You don't have to worry about going to HIKconnect.com to get it. You can download it from the Play Store itself, okay? Or you can physically scan our physical QR. Also remember, if you, for our end user, right, if they want HIK Connect and they're using Android, you have to unfortunately go to appstore.hikvision.com in order to download the application. If you're using an Apple device, you are then able to download it from the Play Store. And that is all from me today, guys. If there's any questions, you can please feel free to ask me. I thank you for the guys that attended. I hope it was informative to you. Like I mentioned, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask me now or leave it in the chat box, or please feel free to send me an email and I will gladly assist you. So what I'll do is I'll leave the chat box open for the next few minutes. And if there's any questions, please feel free to ask me. Thank you, guys. And I hope you have a good day.